Hi, I just went through my very first election in 2023. I would like to talk to you about voter turnout and why your voice is amplified in our local elections. Please enjoy the following video.
Let me first start by telling you about why I want to get into politics. In 2017, I developed ideas to address climate change by providing solutions for people living in the countryside and the cities. But to carry out this vision, I knew I had to approach it politically. But as a person who hasn't been involved in any politics, I did not know how to approach this subject until 2021. In 2021, I was inundated with property crime when I was cleaning up one of my rental properties to the level that I became fearful. I thought this was a super unhealthy attitude, and nobody should live in fear if we decided to live together as a community. I decided to run for city council to reduce crime. Since I knew nothing about the local politics, I decided to learn how the city works by studying the city budget. What I saw in the budget was worrisome and was not sustainable for the long-term health of our city. Our city hasn't developed the ability to generate revenue from its resources, but has become more reliant on property tax. Based on the budget, I decided on my platform in 2022. I took my message and knocked on all the doors in Ward 1 in 2023. It was important to me to check out every corner of the ward, whether they were voters or not. My message overall resonated well with the voters. What I saw in the budget was what the people experienced on the ground. However, there's one particular group of people I had to change my message when I talk to them. I can understand this group very much. They care about climate and how the society is going. They're willing to pay their tax dollars to make it work. It was not hard for me to talk to them because I was one of them. But I didn't pivot my message towards them because I thought they didn't represent the majority of voters. This became even clear right before the election when I pleaded with voters to vote no to the sales tax increase. I got a strong pushback, and they asked me why I didn't care about the infrastructure. At that moment, I knew I didn't frame my message right. I needed to say that a thriving city is the quickest way to reducing carbon footprint, since a city is the best way to organize and distribute resources. Money alone cannot solve problems. In fact, money can hide problems. Our city leaders have to put more effort into financial planning. So you can imagine my disappointment when I saw our city vote 60 to 40 for the sales tax increase. In my opinion, the sales tax increase made our city losing competitiveness with surrounding cities. My first question when I saw the result was who voted in this election, because I knew the people I talked to in the ward wouldn't vote 60 to 40 in favor of a sales tax increase. I decided to research who typically votes in a local election. What I found was quite interesting, and I would like to share my finding with you by discussing our voter turnout from different elections in our city and how to judge a good voter turnout. I will give you my analysis of why the low voter turnout and what will turn out a voter in the local elections. First, as you might know, the ward boundary is drawn in a way to ensure every ward has similar population across the city. However, it turns out that the number of registered voters is not identical across the wards, since kids and immigrants cannot vote. Overall, in Ward 3, we have the highest number of registered voters. Suppose you compare the number of registered voters and the number of people who voted in the presidential election. In that case, Ward 4 has the highest voter turnout since their registered voters are almost the same as actually votes casted. What are the demographics of Ward 4? Young college kids, right? Therefore, this data shows that the college kids participate in the presidential elections. But overall, regardless of the demographics of a ward, if people register to vote, they will very likely vote in a presidential election. Now, I took the previous data and replotted it into a percentage of voter turnout. As expected, Ward 4 has the highest voter turnout. Let's look at the voter turnout for another type of election, gubernatorial election. Immediately, two things already stand out. One, there is a ward-to-ward variation. For example, the percentage of voter turnout in Ward 4 dropped more than in Ward 3. Ward 6 dropped the most among all the wards. 2, there is also an average drop. Even in Ward 3, it dropped by 20 percentage points. The average drop is really interesting because it suggests that demographics is not the only factor behind the change. There is a correlated force behind the drop, and every ward experiences it. Now, once we start to look at another election, the city council election, the average drop became the predominant force, and the average voter turnout reduced from 60% in the gubernatorial election to 20% in the city council election. Here, the ward-to-ward variation is even less essential, but the correlated force has become more critical since we are talking about 40% of the drop. So, what is the correlated force behind the drop? Let's figure it out by examining our local elections in more detail. Here is all the data I can gather from our election website started from 2001. In the past 22 years, we had 6 city council elections. Among them, 4 of them had no ballot questions, while the other 2 had ballot questions. When there is no ballot question, the turnout from the city council election was low, was an average of 30,000 voters turn out consistently. This was interesting since among these 4 elections, there were open seats or incumbent running. Overall, the data suggests that regardless of whether the incumbent were running or not, our voter turnout in the city council election was around 30,000. In the presence of a ballot question, the voter turnout increased by almost a factor of 2. And we will go back to this issue later in the talk again. For mayoral election, as you might know, the voter turnout is high when there is an open seat. In the past 22 years, we had 3 mayoral elections with open seats. Indeed, we had an average of 60,000 voter turnout for these 3 elections. When an incumbent is running, it is known the voter turnout is low. Indeed, when there are no ballot questions, like 2013, we have a low voter turnout, almost the same as the city council election, around 30,000. When there is a ballot question, voter turnout becomes very interesting. In 2009, when we had a question on ranked choice, we had a low voter turnout, similar to if there were no ballot questions. But in 2021, we had a much stronger voter turnout when the ballot question was about the rent control. The voter turnout was almost close to 60,000. This data suggests that the ballot questions mattered. When the question was about the ranked choice, voters did not know what to make from it since it was a new concept. There was almost no additional voter turnout due to the ballot question. When the question was on rent stabilization, voters has more experience since it has been used as a tool in many cities since 1920. voters came out to vote when they had a clear opinion about it. These results almost suggest that some voters wouldn't come out to vote if they couldn't decide. But what is a good vote turnout? Is 60,000 vote turnout a good number? I think the best way to approach this is to examine the election I just went through. In our ward, we had a total of 8 candidates. With 80 to 90% confidence, I can say people who voted for Anika, Uma, and Sus also voted for sales tax increase. If you tabulate their votes, you came up with around 4,000 yes votes. The remaining will be no votes. Using the percentages, we came to almost the same percentage that voted for sales tax increase in our city. When I saw the result, I knew exactly what I had done wrong. How did I know that? Well, I saw Travis only got 4% votes. Now, Travis was a Republican-endorsed candidate. By examining St. Paul presidential election result, I know St. Paul has 20% Republican voters. Because Travis only got 4% of votes, I knew Jeff and I were taking Republican votes away from Travis. To me, all the votes mattered. Of course, I appreciated the votes from Republicans, but it became clear that the voters didn't understand my message. So, what was my message? Well, in my opinion, my message is very progressive because they believe everybody should thrive in our city. We need social mobility. But my message also recognizes our city hasn't done well for many years. We have to examine our city past mistake. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to turn our city around. What if I did a good job spreading my message and got my votes? Let's say 2,000 of them. Then our vote turnout will change to 40%. And I have confidence that we will defeat this ballot initiative with additional 10% voters. Let's examine another election to see how the voter turnout can influence the outcome of a ballot initiative. In 2021 and 23, we had a ballot initiative in both elections. You might first notice why I didn't compare the 2021 mayoral election with the 2023 city council election. Well, the mayoral election in 2021 was run by an incumbent. Since we usually have a low voter turnout when the incumbent is running around 30,000, is very similar to city council election. Therefore, I think these two are legitimate comparisons. Then you might ask, why didn't I use in 2019 city council election? Well, we also had a ballot question, coordinated garbage collection to compare. That ballot question was a tricky one. I'm entirely for coordinated garbage collection. In fact, I wrote a letter to all the city council members to ask them for coordinated garbage collection even before they introducing the bill. However, after talking to the voters in our ward, I realized that the voters were angry about how badly the garbage contract was negotiated. I would love to volunteer to renegotiate this garbage contract because our current garbage contract is not based on data and should be renegotiated as soon as possible. So, in my opinion, only the ballot question in 2021 and 23 should be defeated because they were not good for the long-term health of our city. But these two questions were passed in two different levels. We had a voter turnout of 36% for the rent control question, and the ballot question was passed by 3 percentage points. For the sales tax increase question, we had a voter turnout of 30%, and the ballot question was passed by almost 10 percentage points. Here, I wanted to emphasize the importance of the message rather than the voter turnout. I believe defeating these two ballot questions is the right thing to do. If we campaign hard and bad, we could spread this message and turn out voters. Consequently, I believe voter turnout has much to do with the clarity of the message. In St. Paul, a good enough voter turnout seemed to be around 40%. Of course, we should aim for more democratic voter turnout, such as more than 50%. Our baseline seemed to be 20% of dedicated voters. That tells us we have a deficiency of 70% of voters waiting something for them to come out to vote as compared to the presidential election. So what do these 70% of voters want, right? I think I can be one of spokespeople for these 70% voters because I was one of them. I never voted in local election until the past election when I became a candidate. So I had to ask myself why I didn't vote in the local elections before. I didn't vote because I thought our city was doing well. I knew our country hadn't been doing well, but I did not realize our city also was not doing well. You have to remember why I decided to run for the city council position. It was because I became a target of a repeated crime, first in a very unique circumstance. My rental property was abandoned. I became only aware that St. Paul was not doing well when I started to examine our city budget. Otherwise, I might never have thought about paying attention to local politics. Another thing I didn't realize was that changes can happen more readily from ground up. Here was one of the messages I sent to the voters in the past election. Your vote counts as 1 out of 200 million in a general election, but your vote will count as 1 out of 10,000 in our local election. You have more power in this local election to make changes from the bottom up. But I also had to ask myself why I voted in presidential and gubernatorial elections. The answer is simply that there is just more national news. No matter how hard one tries, local news cannot compete with national news by number. National news also has more in-depth coverage and is more entertaining. I want to point out Jon Stewart pioneered this type of reporting. He has a team of writers. These writers could go in depth on news, digging out old footage, and highlight the hypocrisy. In a short 30 minutes, Jon Stewart delivered them. We are entertained and educated at the same time. There is just no way we can compete with them by doing the same way with our local news. Even for gubernatorial election, we have NPR and TV coverage. For city council election, it is tough for media to cover so many candidates, and it's equally challenging for the voters to judge the candidates. To solve the low voter turnout problem, we have to ask ourselves what will turn out voters in the local election. First of all, we need more local investigative reporters, whether they are traditional or web-based. We also need an independent funding source supporting them. Not only do we need more volumes, but we also need to demand higher quality journalism. I would like to tell you my story of interacting with Star Tribune from this past election. On October 25th, 2023, Star Tribune published an article explaining why St. Paulites pay such a high property tax. When I read this article, although I agreed with what they said, I thought they didn't provide another angle on St. Paul's budget. I wrote my opinion piece immediately and sent it to them the next day. I didn't hear from them for 8 days till Friday before the election. When I received a phone call in the morning and was informed that they would publish my opinion piece if I could provide them with my data analysis by 3 p.m. I thought that was great journalism and was excited to share my data analysis with them. While preparing my data, I received another phone call and I was informed that they ran out of space for publication until after the election. I'm not going to lie, I was angry, since I didn't have a microphone to reach out to the people of St. Paul as effectively as Star Tribune. To me, Star Tribune didn't practice fair journalism. Therefore, we need an information ecosystem providing voters with more data analysis and discussions. We need to nurture voters and allow them to be naturally informed so that they want to vote. Democracy depends on voter turnout, but how to turn out a voter matters. We don't want to trick them. We don't want to force them to vote. Currently, we can divide our voter into 3 groups. The first group is very dedicated and show up at every election. The second group will only come out to vote if they have developed a clear opinion on an issue. The third group so far hasn't voted in any local elections. Our job is first to convince the never local group to vote locally. We also need to inform voters about the local issues and provide more data and data analysis for the voters so that the other 70% of voters will want to vote. Candidates can also play an important role here. I appreciate what the democracy can do for a first-time candidate like me. I did not know any local politics 2 years ago. Only through democracy was I able to run for this campaign, and I hope in return, I also provide a different angle to approach our city politics. My message might not craft perfectly, but I think I made a positive impact on this election by bringing all the candidates to focus on our core services and our budget. But I made a fatal mistake. I didn't ask for money because I didn't think I was qualified to ask since I wasn't involved in local politics before. But right before the election, I realized that I could not have a good organization if I didn't have money. Without a good organization, I cannot turn out voters. Therefore, candidates and organizations are essential to help building our local information ecosystem. But the most importantly, we need to remember what we are fighting for. We need to develop the best governing policies so that our political system can be sustainable in the long term. Usually, one thinks about our government in terms of its size and importance. The federal government is the biggest and the most important. Then the state government, the local government is smallest and maybe least important, and invert the pyramid. By thinking about a governing policy, I realized that we should think about our government in terms of its function, and every government should provide unique, non-overlapping, but crucial functions. Each function should be accountable to the taxpayers. What functions should each level of government have then? Well, not to be exhaustive, but I think federal government should be in charge of our financial system and the long-term economic development, include the safety of our nation. Our state government should focus on the residents' health and education. Our city government should be responsible for the city immediate safety, infrastructure, and housing. If you think about our country as a tree, our local government is like tree roots, while voters are like Mother Earth. All trees will need deep, healthy roots to be long-lasting. I Googled. The longest living tree is 5,000 years old. If each level of the government can figure out how to carry out its function and do them well while coordinating together like a tree, we can make America a country to last for at least 5,000 years. If you like my presentation, please donate to my campaign, and thank you for your time.